Hi everyone, my name is Mark Deere, and in this video I want to talk about a quote I saw recently on the back of a t-shirt. I was coming out of the movies a month or two ago, and on the back of a guy's shirt I saw this quote. It said, "Thoughts become things, so think carefully." And I thought that was really interesting because for me, I put it straight into a note in my phone. For me, it's not really something I've ever thought about, like manifesting and the law of attraction. It's funny, I've talked about it in a few of my videos out of the 100 videos, so you can go back and find it here and there. But again, it's not something I've read a lot about. It's not something I know a lot about. But in recent years, a couple of videos back, I talked about Scattered Minds, which is my nonfiction book of the year. And a lot of what it talks about, as well as my book from 2023, my book of the year by John Sarno, talking about TMS stuff, and another guy, Steve-O, he did a book about TMS. And I've seen it in a lot of different fields, actually, where people will say, what you think becomes reality, right? So if you're always stressed and always thinking, oh, things are bad, things are going to be bad. If you're always thinking things are great, things are going to go well, things will go well. And that's the basic gist. Don't get me wrong, there are people who know it a lot more than I do about this concept. But the shirt really struck a chord with me. I think it's because little by little, I'm changing my mindset towards, I think I've always had a growth mindset. I read the book by Carol Dweck years ago, 2012, talking about mindset. So there's growth mindset and fixed mindset. People have a fixed mindset, think I'm born with this much talent, I'm born with this much ability, things are the way they are, I can never change. Growth mindset is I can change, anything I work on I can get better at, this situation can change, you know, growth mindset. So obviously growth mindset is the more desirable of the two mindset options. And so that, I read that years ago and I was like, yeah, I think I've always been like that. I've always been an optimist. I've always thought, yes, the glasses are full. Yes, things can work out great. And again, I've talked about this on other videos, that you can, in any sort of situation, choose to see some sort of positive. And I've always done that, just like naturally, by instinct. And lately I'm seeing that sort of as a negative, because it's kind of like, rather than wanting more, which I made a video about that, like wanting more, rather than wanting more, you kind of just go, well, I got this out of it. Like, well, this was okay. So like I've always kind of done the optimism thing, and I've always done the thinking positive, even when negative things happen. But I don't think I've ever gone beyond that to actually proactively try to manifest more or better things into my life, right? So this is the thing. I think the power of thinking is much greater than I've ever given it credit for. So I've probably kind of always sort of done the right thing that people would say, you should try to think positive. And I'm not talking about positive thinking. It's funny because I talked about Oliver Burkeman a couple of videos back as well, who's a great writer, and he wrote a book called The Antidote, where he's basically saying like positive thinking is a bit of a, not a sham, but like, here's the reasons why positive thinking isn't as great as everyone says it is. But I'm not talking about positive thinking. I'm talking about what you think is likely to, you know, create your reality. So if you're always like, oh, everything sucks, the odds of everything sucking are much higher than if you're like, everything's great. More likely things are going to be great. And you meet these people. I read a book about luck a few years ago. I can't remember what the name of it is, but it was a really great book. I loved it. There's a guy who's like whole deal, he's done a PhD in it, I'm pretty sure, is just studying luck. And he's like, you can get more luck. I think it was called The Luck Factor. Yeah. And it was a really good book. I did the exercises as I went through it. I should remember the author's name. It's terrible that I don't, but it was years ago. But yeah, in that book, The Luck Factor, he basically said, like, you know, you can get more luck. All you have to do is work on luck. Just work on it, like, and think, like, enter more competitions, do more things, like, proactively. And this is, again, you're thinking, the kinds of people who win things are the kinds of people who think they're going to win. And they're the kind of people who enter things and try to win, right? So I think thoughts become things. So think carefully. In addition to that, and this is in a book Candice recently read. Sorry, I'm putting all these books together, but I'm just thinking out loud. And I didn't want to not make a video about this. I'm so close to the end and I didn't want to not make a video about this quote because I really spent a lot of time thinking about it. But yeah, she recently read a book called Biggest Loser Wins. And it's all about psychology. So it's about trading. But really, she said, like, if you took all the word trading out of this and just made it a book about psychology, it would sell 1 million copies because it's a very good book about psychology. And in that book, the guy said he doesn't really like the law of attraction idea and manifesting, the idea of that, because he's like, I've worked extremely hard to get the knowledge I have. And to say you can have anything you want by just thinking it, it's just not true. And I think this is what I'm talking about when I talk about how I was always like, well, this was good, there was this good thing, well, I learned this. You know, there's being an optimist and keeping whatever you have, and then there's aspiring for more or working for more, focusing on the process. I made a video about that recently too, talking about how process is important, more important than outcome. And I think that's where manifesting can kind of not necessarily be the whole picture, right? But again, I haven't read a lot of books about manifesting, and I plan to read a lot more books about it this year. I'm going to try to learn a lot more about that area just because I'm very interested in it. And obviously this quote resonated with me enough that it's worth pursuing. So there's another guy, my favorite YouTuber, his name's Marcus Rothkranz. He's awesome. He's just a cool and likable guy. And he worked on films in the he made a feature film in the early 90s independently. And he's done so much stuff. He's an incredible realistic painter and a great photographer and just a cool guy. I know so much about health. So Marcus Rothkranz, he wrote a book called The Prosperity Secret. And he kind of said the opposite of what Rhonda Byrne said in her books about manifesting, where he said, like, you don't need to think about it. Like, as soon as you give everything away and stop having all those thoughts, things will just come to you. You'll just magnetize things, right, without having to think about it. Where she says, think about it explicitly, like she did her affirmations or whatever in the book I read that I talked about recently, Countdown to Riches. In that book, she, you know, you're just specifically saying, I am rich, I am well. You're like thinking specific thoughts about that thing to make it a reality, which is what the back of this shirt says, you know, think carefully, because thoughts become things. Whereas he says, if you don't think about it, if you don't focus on money, then money will come to you. So he's saying the opposite thing. And this is why I want to read more about it, because I want to get a sense, and I guess I'll experiment in the new year. It's going to be interesting. And if I have any new findings, I will make a video about it. But yeah, it's been really, I don't know, like I said, it stuck with me. So it's obviously in the growth journey I'm on right now, it was something that I feel like if something kind of strikes a chord with you, it's worth stopping, reflecting on, and, you know, moving in that direction for a while to see how it goes. So that's what I'm planning on doing. Anyway. Thoughts become things, so think carefully. Interesting quote. What do you think? I'd love to hear from everyone in the comments. This is something where, like I say, because I'm not an expert on it, I'd love to hear what everyone thinks. And yeah, definitely comment if you've got the time. Thanks to everyone who's recently subscribed. If you want to hear more from me in the new year, because I'll be making less videos once I get through my 100 in 100 days, I'm going to be sending out email newsletters weekly next year. So go to my website, markdeary.com, and you can put in your first name and email address and sign up for updates from me in the new year. Anyway, thank you so much for watching today, and I guess I'll see all you guys in the next video.